Here we go.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today, and thank you for this group of new friends. Thank you for the gifts and talents that you give us, and then you provide opportunities to use them. And Lord, I just ask that you would give each of us a new piece of information and a new way to use it today. And thank you for people sharing the gifts that they've been able to perfect or just train better than the rest of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Ooh, that perfect word, that was tricky.
I know.
Thank you for praying. I definitely don't have this perfected, so let's I just want to make sure you hear me say that. I do not think I am anything special. I have just been fortunate enough to work with a lot of talented people that are smarter than me, wiser than me, more experienced, and better than I am. And I've tried to learn as much as possible from them in the past 13 years doing this professionally. And so now I'm just trying to pass on some information. I mean, if you're a beginner, if you're within the first, say 5 years of doing this, I think a lot of this information will be helpful. If you're more intermediate advanced, less of it will be new to you. There might be a couple new things and it might just be some good reminders, but I feel like reminders are good. We need reminders. I don't know. I was talking about this the other day and it's funny. I was saying that whatever the discipline is, it's almost like you gauge how much you're doing versus how much you know. Like when it comes to nutrition or fitness or spiritual discipline or acting, it's like we know a lot, but then we forget a lot and we only do certain things. So reminders are good as well. All right, so our famous disclaimer to the end of what I was saying a minute ago is neither Laura or I claim to be the gurus or the know-it-alls, or that anything we say is the end or the end all be all of what is to be said. So continue to do your research, continue to read, continue to watch interviews, listen to interviews and podcast and study and go to classes and all those things and cross-reference everything we say with other stuff. That is just wise, I think, in general. And certain casting directors, as Laura may can tell you, because she is a casting director, certain casting directors have their own particular pet peeves, whereas they'll have a thing they love or hate, and other ones it just doesn't. They're indifferent to it. It doesn't matter. For instance, I just saw this is the first time I've ever seen this. I've just saw a casting. Oh, I can't remember exactly what it was for, but if you don't know, you typically kind of get two things with a breakdown when they give you a self-tape request. You'll have a script and then you have like taping instructions. A lot of times the taping instructions are generic for them. It's the same taping instructions kind of every time that casting office sends out something. Sometimes there will be specific telling you what to do, because if it's weird stuff in the script, they'll tell you maybe just to act the stuff out. Don't really do it. Just kind of pantomime, just pause, whatever. You got to read through all that every time. I'll get to that in a minute. But to my point, the last note on there is they said, never hold a prop gun or a real gun in frame. I have never seen that before. I've done both before. I think not purposely, usually your frame kind of chest and head is typical. So typically props don't really play much except for like a phone. Or if you're sweeping maybe the top of the broom or whatever, but it's usually not an issue, but I think they've kind of come into frame a little bit. Anyway, I say all that to say, know your casting director, maybe research online, see if they have YouTube videos or tutorials or do's and don'ts that they put out. But of course, always read those instructions because everyone's different. So as we go along, if you have a question on anything, just type it in the chat. Laura's going to moderate for us and kind of read through those. So we can hopefully get through as much material as possible. I tried to put these in some kind of order, but it's hard. There's so much to go over. That's the other thing with the disclaimer is that there's so much to be said on this stuff. That's why people take classes for years, and then they say it takes 25 years to master this because there's just so much to it. So let me start off by saying this too, just kind of a background of my kind of approach to acting, because certain schools of thought, certain people will be like, oh, well, that there's too much emphasis on this thing, or there's too much emphasis on this thing. In an ideal world, okay, I love acting. I love being just across from someone and just being in that scene and getting lost in it, and having that interaction and observing and reacting, and you almost kind of black out a little bit. You forget, the lights go away, the cameras go away, everything else goes away. You're just lost in that moment with that person, and that's great. And I love that. In an ideal world, that's all you'd have to think about. You could just have all these genuine moments within the facade of the imaginary circumstances, right? And I wouldn't think about all the technical stuff. But the fact of the matter is, technical matters. And when you have, especially when you think about self-tapes, and you have so many people submitting self-tapes, if all you're thinking about is the connection, which is great, you got to think about the connection to the words and the relationship and the point of view and the situation and all that. But if you're getting lost in that and you have, terrible eye lines and terrible lighting, whether it's this or whether it's this, if you have all these weird technical things that make you, that take the viewer out of it, they're just going to delete and they're going to move on. There's so many people submitting for these that they don't have to choose great acting or technician. They're going to have people that do them both. So I know a lot of people hate the technical stuff and say, oh, you get too technical with this and that, and you're sucking the life out of it. But the fact of the matter is, although great acting still trumps everything, you do have to have it, but you have to have both. And the other fact of the matter is, a lot of times when we're starting out, we're not auditioning for leads and big meaty roles where the focus is really more on the acting. A lot of times we're auditioning for supporting roles and smaller roles where, to be honest, it doesn't take a lot of acting. You know what I mean? You're just kind of the waiter that's like, oh sir, you left your food on the table, or whatever. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, on a big production, I'll be the waiter that says you left your food on the table. And I got no ego there. Still a chance to get on set, to work, to meet people. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I would love to not be bogged down by the technical stuff, but the fact of the matter is, it's a very technical medium as well. So a lot of these things will sound technical.
To add
All
to
right.
that, the film festival last week, in one of the sessions, they did say, you don't have to worry about your lighting. You don't have to be picky about your audio, but somebody else is going to be doing that with their audition. So do you want to meet them where they are? Do you want to level up and be your best or not? And that's totally your choice. Like Joseph is saying, you can go, hey, my acting is enough. Well, that's okay. But somebody else who's submitting is going to make sure that their acting chops are on fire and also that their technical stuff is in place. So.
Yeah. Again, talk to some casting directors, man. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people submitting for some of these roles. So, like I said, if you have that arrogance about you, great, but you're probably just going to get deleted unless you know somebody, unless you have a special connection, because there are going to be a lot of people with big resumes that are good at this, that are also nail the technical. And that's funny. You said level up, because level up is at the last sentence of that next point that I was going to say. So I'll run through some stuff quickly. You may already know a lot of this. So the actual setup, what Laura was just referring to, with your lights and your microphone and your backdrop and your stuff. Again, you don't have to spend thousands and thousands and get a totally professional setup. You don't have to go to a professional studio every time. But the more you can tweak it, and it's just, I mean, it's not rocket science. They market and product. They market things a certain way for a reason, because we're very visual and this is a very visual medium. And so, if it looks good, if it sounds good, that's just going to make you look and sound better. And there's going to be an aura of, I like this better, versus it looks or sounds cheap. I was just thinking, I don't have this mic set up now, but I kind of have one of these microphones. Can you see that? Or is it? Yeah. I got a separate mic that I use too for most of my auditions. So that sounds good. You can go online and research now more than ever. 10 or 15 years ago, anybody that's been here doing this for a while, it's much harder to find those lights and stuff. You'd have to get professional grade lighting. Now everyone's got a ring light. Now everyone's a YouTuber, Instagrammer, influencer. So it's much, much easier to find this equipment real cheap. You don't have to get fancy mic. You can get a little lav mic that just connects to you and has a wire and goes to your phone for like $30. You don't even have to have that, but if you don't have that, I would look into editing software that reduces the background noise, because there's that kind of hiss in the background. Anyway, that's a little bit more advanced, but I'm just saying it. Standard setup is, typically chest to head, approximately. Read your taping instructions. Sometimes that's different. Sometimes it's wider for commercials to see your activity and your physicality. Well lit, they want to be able to see the color of your eyes. Simple, non-distracting background without a bunch of stuff on it or shadows. Good audio. They can hear you well, and they don't hear a bunch of other stuff. Make sure your reader is not overpowering you. You want to hear the reader, so you hear the other lines, but they don't want to sound like they're like right on top of the mic and you're way far away. Again, these are pretty general things. I'll try to fly through these real quick. Yeah, but then my last so I've booked stuff. I did an audition from the room of a cruise ship, and I didn't really have anything. Well, I didn't have I didn't have my setup with me one time because I was like, I'm on the cruise for 4 days with my family, a small room, packing, flight, yada yada. I got the call back though, and when I got off the ship, the day I got off the ship in Miami, we were killing some time. We had a bus tour in Miami for a few hours before our flight took off. They called me and were like, "Hey, they're meeting right now. You're in top consideration. They want to do another take." I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have a hotel. I literally went next to some docks and tried to wait between the sounds of boats and like construction workers and find a general basic background that wasn't distracting with some decent light. And I had my brother-in-law kind of hold the iPad like this, so it was kind of stationary. And I did my callback from there, and I ended up booking it and getting it. So, like Laura said, it doesn't have to be professional, but the better it looks, the better your chances are, I think, to a certain degree. Camera should typically be about what's that?
Sorry, I was just saying improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yes. Okay, where was I? Camera should typically be about eye level. So we'll get to this in a second, but you know, if you get to weird angles, you start looking up your nose and it's just not, you know, if you get a booger, you're out. So be mindful of your eye lines. Again, I know a lot of this is a review, but if you're too far to the side, you lose your second eye, and it's just it's profile, and there's that just needs to be very specific. There's only going to be a handful of reasons why you might do that, and it wouldn't be long. It'd probably just be a glance and then back. So you have a lot of play so that it doesn't, you know, don't be so close where you can't quite tell, are they looking in the lens or not? Make sure it's definitely not the lens, but then you have some room to play on both sides. Be mindful of your eye lines when you're looking down. You know, say your character, if it's very explicit, your character has a clipboard and is reading off, you know, don't do this, because we just lost you entirely. You get that clipboard up there so you can reference the clipboard and come back up, or do whatever the physicality is you need, but be mindful of the eye lines. And like I said, the looking up one is too. Pick yourself, you know, you got to learn this. You got to record, you got to watch back. Pick an eye line where if I need to look up in the sky, or, you know, look up at someone that's tall, well, I can look up and it can read as me looking up, but it doesn't look like that. You know what I mean? Figure out your eye lines ahead of time and be mindful of those eye lines within the frame. While I'm reviewing my notes, Laura, do you have anything I've just said? Do you have any notes or chime in on that?
Eyeline, does everybody know what that is? If you don't, actually, if somebody does not know, let me real quick look at a gallery view. Does anybody not know what eyeline is? Because that's super, super important. I don't see anybody raising their hand. Okay. If you're just embarrassed, then that's okay too. But look up eyeline after this. Very, very important, because it can take your audition from being really powerful to being super distracting if like you're all over the place, and choose where your characters are in the room, put some tape up on the wall, or choose a vase in the background, something to make sure that you're, especially if you're talking to more than one character, make sure that your eyes are going exactly to those same places over and over, because you might not think it's noticeable when your frame is just this. It is absolutely noticeable. So, and that's
it can get very Yes, and it can get very confusing. So if Charles is supposed to be over here and Danielle's over here, and you're not clear on that, and you're looking around when you're talking, you're supposed to be talking to Danielle and you're talking to Charles, or Danielle's talking, you're looking over here, it gets weird. It's hard to follow. So yes, choose separate eye lines for different people if you're interacting with different people, or different things. If you have to, look off and notice the car in the distance or whatever it is, figure those things out. I got some more eyeline stuff, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
Well, why don't you go ahead and mention this, Joseph, since you were already talking about, like that improv callback. What happens if you're already on set? This is something Laura's asking. It's a good thing to mention. What if you get a callback and you're on set and you still have to do another callback? Does casting understand? How do you mention it when you're on set that you have another callback? Could you just mention, what would you personally do if you were expected to do a callback when you were already on set for another project?
You're saying if I got booked and I'm on another set and I can't attend the callback?
I think if you are supposed to do a callback and you are on set, so those two things are happening at the same time. Laura, is that correct?
I mean, I don't know that there's much to be said other than, that seems like a good problem, and it seems like a good problem to even propose. You know, they want people that are working professionals. So, I mean, that's, you don't say it with any sort of arrogance, you sign it with kindness and humbleness, and ask if there's please any kind of exception that can be made. You know, if you can attend a Zoom, if you can reschedule, if you can whatever, but if you're already on set, you're already on set. I mean, I've done callbacks from a set. When I had break on something else, I got another actor. We went over next to a window where there was some decent lighting, and they recorded on their phone real quick and sent it in, because that's all I was going to be able to do. And I'm pretty sure I think I booked that one too.
Okay, so
So
I'm curious to know how casting sees that, Laura. I personally, if I were asking for a callback, what I would love to hear from you is, hey, I'm on set for another project. I expect my break to be maybe between 7 and 9 o'clock tonight. Of course, you know that could change, but does that time work for you? How would you like him to accommodate? Otherwise, we should wrap by 10 p.m. and our call time tomorrow is 9 a.m. If you just tell me what your schedule is, I absolutely understand a filming schedule, and I'm probably going to be thrilled to know that you're working on another project right now. But just that complete transparency to me would speak of professionalism. It would also make me very aware of what your constraints would be, and it would make me completely understanding of your situation. If you can't make the time otherwise you feel right back and say, well, hey, I can't do it today, but you don't tell me why. I don't know how you're prioritizing things. If I know you're on set, I will be grateful that you are being respectful to the project that you're on right now, and that this is taking a back seat, because I would hope that if I book you for the project, that you would do the same for me. On my project, you would fulfill that commitment, and then in your downtime, make that other one happen. That's just me.
cool. Moving right along, just because we have so much to cover. Costuming is not encouraged. However, you can absolutely dress towards the role, so you don't need to get into full regalia of, helicopter pilot jumpsuit and helmet and goggles and all that. But definitely, you could dress towards the role. Whether it's a raggedy T-shirt if that fits, or a suit and tie if that fits, or those kinds of things. Even so much as I know, like I even have, because I've collected them through the years, I've got like a nurse's scrub thing, I've got a lab coat, I've got some military stuff, but without going into full-on costuming, and making sure you're not doing anything distracting. You can dress in the vein of towards the character, especially if there's a character description. This is like, this guy's all business, Fortune 500. Hey, don't wear a tank top. That's not Fortune 500. Or conversely, total slob, barely made it out the door today. Don't look slick with the suit and tie and shave and all that kind of stuff. I've even done some stuff too with aging. Like if I'm supposed to be in my mid 40s or older, I might carefully put a little gray in my hair there. But I think subtle is the key there, and nothing distracting. Nothing to distract away from. Same with like the background and the sound and the lighting, everything else. They just want to be able to focus on the performance. So a little bit of something to help them get in the mindset of who you are portraying without it being distracting. Props, not necessary, but basic props can be included. For instance, a phone. A lot of people do phones, right? I mentioned the other thing because I was sweeping in one. So I had a broom, and the broom handle just barely came into frame, but it just gave me a little activity, a little something to do. But remember, when you're in this framing, other than phone or something that's going to stick up, most props aren't really going to come into frame except for very specific instances, So, like that gun example, if you were, if I'm holding a bigger, weapon, that's what's called for in the script, I can do this like I am. There's nothing in my hands, but you can't tell when I'm just at a frame, like this. So if it helps you, use it, but don't make the scene about the prop, because that gets distracting too. Just be careful about what comes up into frame, prop wise.
Bev Holloway mentioned in a recent casting live that she did on Facebook, her rule of thumb is if you would bring it into the casting room, such as a water bottle, then bring it into frame for your video. If you would not bring it into the room, then reconsider using it in your self-tape. I thought that was helpful.
Great. That's a great way to put it. To that end, as my next note here is kind of be careful what you're doing outside of frame if it's not clear what it is. Meaning, like if it's clear, like I had a scene, I just remember not too long ago where I had 4 different people that it was very explicit in the scene. I'm meeting these people for the first time. I'm acknowledging them. I'm shaking their hands, going around the group or whatever. So I had my 4 separate eye lines, and I did nice to meet you. I did my little handshake kind of action with all of them. Well, if there's no scripted handshake and you're doing this kind of weird stuff out of the frame, people don't know what's going on, and that again, that goes back to it can be distracting. So if there's a very clear action that you're doing that's mentioned in the stage direction and it's kind of crucial or critical, or some of your dialogue hinges on it, you can kind of do that action. But if you're improvising a bunch of action outside of the frame, it can look strange, like you're dancing or chopping onions or something. I don't know. I'm just going to keep moving, running through my bullet points here. My personal preference, and I'd love to hear Laura's position on this. I've kind of been told and operate under the idea that the thought that I don't slate unless they ask for it, for a couple reasons. One, I don't want to take them out of the audition any more than I need to. Again, if they ask for a slate, you slate and you do exactly what they ask for. But if there's no slate asked for, I don't do it because, again, a couple things. I might say something like my height, and maybe their idea of the character was a little bit shorter or taller. I don't want them to dismiss me right out of the gate because of my height, when they might love my audition. I'm gonna let them love me first, and then I'll tell them when they ask me if they don't already know my height. They should know that already because it's on all the casting breakdowns in your resume. But anyway, yeah. So, and especially if your character is much different than you want to give that character vibe within the audition, and you don't want to come out of it and then say you're serious, solemn, disgruntled, whatever character, and all of a sudden you come on, hi, my name is Joseph Gray, I'm 6 foot tall from Greensboro, North Carolina. And then it's like, whoa, who's that guy? So anyway, that's why I said that. That's not a big deal. It's just a little tidbit, because I've heard some other new actors that think they always have to slate, and I get a handful of the big casting directors don't ask for it anymore, so I don't do it. Laura, did you have a specific thought on that? I guess, does everyone know what a slate is?
So I suggest if folks are just adamant about putting it on there, I always tell them to put it at the end, because like you said, I want to introduce myself. I want my characters to be the first thing that I see the actor in. So if I'm watching self-tapes, the minute I see your face, I want to see you in that role. Now, I don't mind meeting you after the audition, you as Joseph, but like you said, especially if it's a really powerful audition, I feel like sometimes it can be distracting to have seen your slate first. So if you have your slate and you're just super proud of it and you just figure, if I'm really a professional actor, I'll have a slate, then put it at the end, because then if they want to watch it, they can. And if they don't, then they'll just turn it off. Otherwise, if it is not asked for, some people worry, well, but what if they would have wanted it? I can promise you that if they want it, they will ask for it. So it goes back to what he was saying about just being really careful that you're reading through these submission breakdowns, because they'll tell you exactly what they expect of you. And you don't have to worry and have that inner battle, whether I should or I shouldn't. If they don't ask for it, then you are under no pressure to include it. But if you insist, I would recommend putting it at the end.
Okay. Yes. Well, I was going to say, I would also, again, Laura, I would love your opinion on this. I would, for the side of the actor, I would start the camera between slate and between scenes. I know some people will slate, they'll go right into the scene, and then they'll transition, they'll go into the second scene, which is actually in the script, a couple scenes later. That's not one continuous thing, so that you can have your moment before at the top of the scene. You can be in it right at the word go, and you can refocus on what it is you're focusing on at the time. So I would, edit those together with a start of the camera, so you can be exactly where you need to be in your headspace and preparation and everything else, without trying to transition from one to the other seamlessly. Laura, did you have a thought on that?
Agreed. And some actors actually have a slate that they've specifically perfected. So then you just keep that little, 7 to 10 second video clip, and then you add it on as a separate video clip. So you might be wearing something entirely different. I would suggest that your lighting be identical. I would suggest that your backdrop be the same. Your clothing may be different. But sometimes if you have filmed a really solid slate, then keep that little video file and just add it on at the end of the editing process.
Cool. All right. So we've already talked about this, but hey, say it again. Read all audition instructions. And I say that because a lot of times it will be redundant. It'll say the same thing it said last time, or it'll say the same thing as everybody else says, but they'll have maybe one new piece of information about how you name the file, or do you put the files together, or do you put them separately? Or again, about framing, maybe they do something weird like second take, widen out to waist up framing, and you didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? So it can just take the time and read through it. So I said have a reader at all times, if at all possible. In person is the standard and the expectation. Now we're in a world of post-pandemic and there's a lot more Zooming. I would try your best to get an in-person reader, because some casting directors do not like to hear that person on Zoom as your reader or over the phone as your reader, because it's a different vibe, a different sound to it. I hesitate to even say this, but on real simple auditions where I'm basically, let's say for instance, I'm just I'm doing something and like a news report comes on the TV. You know, I'm doing something, a news report comes on and it gets my attention and I just react to it. Maybe say one line like, "Camera, we got to go," or I just react. I have been known to record myself saying the other line with maybe 30 seconds ahead of time, placing it over there, press play, come over here, do my activity, and then just when I hear myself talk, that's the news report. You see what I'm saying? That's a worst case scenario. I don't recommend that ever. That was only because it was like 2 a.m. or something, and I had to get it in. I didn't feel like I had any other time to do this whatsoever, and I couldn't call anybody. I couldn't have anybody get up and do it with me or meet me. So yeah, standard is have a reader. Okay. Ooh, this is one that took me a while to learn. Laura, I think we talked about this before in one of the other ones, but I would, based on what I've heard, yeah, that's one way to improvise with myself. I would start in frame. Here's why. Even if I start out of frame and the scene is, I walk and I notice and then I stop and turn. Okay. If you recorded that, where's your edit point? Where do you start the scene that you actually submit? You don't start here, because then your thumbnail looks like an empty thing, like you don't know what you're doing, and they're liable to just delete it without even pressing play. So then you're going to have to stop it between here and here. And it's going to be blurry and it's going to look like your thumbnail is out of focus or blurry or whatever. So I would just rock into it. You can still have the top action a little bit if you want to kind of rock in at the top, but I would already start with that thumbnail being pretty darn good. I can still see both of my eyes and I'm just slightly askew, you know what I mean? And I would just kind of rock into it and then notice my person. So I can still kind of have that action at the top of it, but still kind of be within the parameters of what a great frame and audition should look like. So yeah, be careful with the top of your scene, what you do. I would want your first thumbnail frame to still be something that the casting director can look at and it doesn't look terrible. They're like, "Oh, that's just garbage. They don't even know what they're doing." I want them to be able to look at it and be like, "Well, yeah, it looks great. Okay, let me press play." And then you come into your action. And I'm going to say this and then I'm going to throw it over to Laura, because I'd love to hear her ideas on both of these two things I just said, the start and the end. At the end of the scene, most of the time on this taping instructions they send you, they'll say, let the last final moment or two play out. Don't just say your final word and then cut yourself or cut the edit of the audition that you're recording. Let a moment or two play out, not for some long dramatic effect, but let it resonate. Consider what it is. Okay, so you have that at the end, and then when you're editing, you can choose where you want to stop it without it being so abrupt. Because if you recall, think back to like watching television shows. Many times before they cut that scene or they cut to the commercial break, they're on that character, ruminating about what happened. There's this reaction. They don't typically end on word cut. Whatever that final line is, a reaction or a consideration, and then cut out. To that end, I would only leave the frame at the end for a very, very good, very specific reason as well. Because also, what do you want that last frame to be? If they just watched it and it stopped and they're sitting there thinking and considering, do they want to see you considering it, lost in a moment as the character, or do you want them to be looking at that at the end of your audition? Um, Even if it's, I guess if it says leave, you can give a beat or two, leave, or you can kind of start to leave and then into your audition. So again, you're still in the frame as the character, and you've still given them that kind of the intention of the leaving at the end of the scene. Laura, what do you have to say to both the start and end? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So the start, I was working with an actor one time who literally was supposed to jump up from behind a chair and surprise the the other person in the scene. And they're like, how do I do that if I'm not in frame at first? So that was the one exception that I have made ever to working with an actor and saying, yes, okay, go ahead and start out of frame. But it was sort of a Disney-esque sort of, like high school vibe. It was just that Disney style. So he went down and then he just bounced up over into the screen, and it worked for that particular audition. I've never seen it work well for any other audition. So that said, intro, I love everything that you said. Exit, one of the most difficult things for me watching a tape, especially because I'm watching the same sides over and over and over, is literally when they'll say the last line and then you see them lean in. Okay, first of all, give it a minute. Don't let me see you lean in to hit stop. I know you're going to do that, but I don't need to see it. So give yourself that minute. But before you even give yourself that minute, which is only your editing space, like you're just giving yourself wiggle room to zoom back on the edit and click chop. But before that, let that moment simmer for a little bit, whether it's happy, whether it's sad, whether it's reflective, whether it's angry, whether it's defeated. Let me see that for a minute, because I can't stand it. You would think, if you've gotten me engaged emotionally and then you shut it off, that's very, very disappointing for me. Now, it doesn't take away from your performance, but it leaves me feeling unfulfilled. It would be like if somebody shut the movie off like 3 seconds before the end and you didn't get to see how it resolved. That's how it feels from a casting perspective. And one of my favorite stories to tell on this is that I was casting for actually the biblical film that Jennifer was a part of with us. And the one character was Herod's son, and all he had was 2 words, and he said, 3, Father, it's hot. Well, before that, there was an entire page of scene action where his father was wrestling around with him. It was hot outside. He was sweating. His dad was trying to teach him to sword fight, and he is just feeling incredibly intimidated by Herod, his father, and he's this puny little Antipas. And so many tapes I got, literally, they were like 12 seconds long. The camera turned on and they go, Father, it's hot, or Father, it's hot, or, and they did all kinds of things, but the tapes were only about, yes, it's so hot, that that awning commercial, remember, where the guy's like, it's so hot. Yes, no 2 a.m. infomercials, please. But this kid blew me away because his audition tape was 2 minutes. That got my attention. I said, how did he pull 2 minutes out of this? And so I watched, and he acted out every single bit of the action on that page. He could only react. But because his character was so reactive, he had so little dialogue, because he was such a puny son of King Herod, that most of his personality, most of his appearance would be simple nonverbal reactions to this overbearing and highly evil father. And so I would see him, kind of flinching, and he would come back and he would take a deep breath and he would move his head and he would go back. And then at that moment where Herod is supposed to speak, he's yelling at him and he goes, Father, it's hot. And then he gave it a minute, and then he let Herod react. And then he kind of went back into this humble, submissive stance. And I was like, yes. Yes, yes. I sent it to the director. I found Antipas. Here he is, right here. Period. Nobody else can audition. But it was because he let that moment play out. Both his lines, listen, y'all, the lines are important, but your reactions are so important too. And sometimes it's a reaction to something you've said. but let yourself simmer in that moment, please. And let it be. Watch the next time you watch TV, notice how many times what Joseph is saying, where you pan in on that character. Notice the faces they're making. Notice what their body language is saying. Notice how long does the camera stay on them, because that is intentional. And it's so, so important to let the audience go ahead and finish feeling that moment. And I promise you, it makes a huge difference in your tape.
I'm going to start using that as a slur, puny little Antipas. What'd you call me? Never mind. All right, so next note I have is I just saw this posted by a big casting director the other day. It was saying, so if you spend time on set and you know about the different setups and the different lenses, you know how you sometimes have to change your physicality depending on the lens, right? If you're on a 35 or 50 and you're wider, you have a lot more, you're further back, you have a lot more, you've got to feel this, you can't just be here. Physicality, as it pertains to your character, of course, but you have much more room to move. On your Z-axis, you have more room to move, to stay in focus, to be in focus still. And then on your side-to-side axis, you've got it as well. So within your framing, which is, kind of close up, medium close up, right? More of a medium close up, you can move. Feel free to move within the frame that you have, so you kind of have to feel it out and establish it kind of in your body. What I will do a lot of times is I'll have my feet spread a little bit and just know, okay, this is kind of what I have. I can kind of shift from one foot to the other. But then if I start to take a step, all right, now I've gone too far. So really, within this frame, pertains to the scene, if it pertains to the character, if it makes sense, I can move a little bit within the frame. Now, depending on what camera you have, the in and out may happen. Like this is an autofocus kind of situation. If you don't have an autofocus, this plane right here, when you lean forward or backwards, you can go out of focus. So it depends on what you have going on. But yeah, don't be afraid to move within the frame that you've got set up there. We'll get back to most questions at the end there. I saw the focal length question. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
And what Joseph is saying is super important from a casting director position, because otherwise it looks like I'm watching video after video of cardboard cutouts. Because I understand, like, if you're using this frame respectfully, but you have this frame. So please, once in a while, for the love of all things holy, lean in a little bit, move around a little bit, because it turns your tape from like this cardboard cutout to a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional appearance or a performance, and it really makes a huge difference. So don't be afraid to use the space.
Sure. And what's funny is you just talk about, go back and watching, like, yeah, if you can watch the stuff you're auditioning for, or the people you're auditioning for, their other projects or something similar in tone, if that's noted. Like I just helped a lady with audition that actually she might be on this call. They said it was a cross between, what was it, Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Ted Lasso. So if you go watch those shows, you get a vibe for what they're looking for, what the kind of thing is. So go and look at the characters and look how they move on camera, and understand that your body language communicates certain things. We are conditioned to consume media a certain way. We're conditioned to see things a certain way. Usually it makes sense. Usually if it's something you're having a quiet moment or more intense moment, you lean in a little bit. That just makes perfect sense. That's what we do in real life. I'm having a conversation and I have something more personal to tell Laura. I might lean in a little bit, right? So like what Laura was saying, you can do that within the frame and within the space. Just be aware of what you do and how it looks on camera. Even so much so, one thing I kind of learned more recently was shifting my eye lines within the frame and what it communicates to the viewer. So for instance, let's say we have the clipboard thing. We talked about that earlier, right? So let's say I'm reading some information. It's crucial to the scene. I'm reading information that has an impact and it matters to me and my other reader. Okay, now I have options of where to put this and how that move looks on camera. I can put my reader here and just do this, or I can have my reader over here. Now, what takes the viewer on a little bit of a transition with you more if I get this powerful information and just do this, or if I get this powerful information and I'm over here, or vice versa. See what I'm saying? So now I can use this frame a little bit more. I can tell a more dynamic story and take the audience on a transition with me versus just, you know. So it depends on the character. It depends on what you want to do. Maybe that is the right thing. Maybe it's more comedic and you're bouncing, you know, up and down or whatever. I don't know. But just be aware of what you're doing in the frame, because ultimately it's what's in the frame that matters. So yeah, be aware of that, and go and learn and study and watch what people do and what makes things look different, what communicates different things. And then that's not to say, okay, go and then choreograph a performance where you plan out like a dance, you know, move 1 through 27. You know, it's not, I'm not saying that. I'm saying just understand what things communicate, and then watch playback. And yeah, maybe you say, oh, well, I think it would just be better if I put my clipboard over here and them over there. And now I just established that. And now I live in the moment. I'm not thinking constantly, oh, I'm looking to my left, I'm looking up to my right. Just establish your parameter after you watch playback and say, yeah, I think this looks better. I think I like the way this looks better. Okay, now I just know I'm going to consider over here and I'm going to consider over here, and it reads better on camera. So that a lot of this is putting in the reps, doing it, watching playback. Yeah. All right.
Really are creating art. So like he's saying, look at it as a whole. Don't just listen to your audio, make sure that's on point. Just don't just evaluate your lighting and make sure that's good. Of course, yes, we do those things, but we're also artists, we're creative. So make sure that you have told the story in the most interesting, beautiful, authentic way. Don't make movements just to make movements. And if you're supposed to be standing stone still at a graveside, then you better not move. But make sure that it is truthful to your circumstances, and then make it as artful and as interesting as you can to watch.
Yeah. My next bullet point, it's funny that I didn't even realize it, but it's watch playback, both to learn and assess, but also, here's a big one, to confirm before you submit. Because some of these casting portals, like Actors Access, for instance, once you upload, you hit that final submit, you can't take it back. And I have accidentally, you know, learned from my mistakes, played the fool, and I thought my audition was edited well, and I submitted it, and then I watched playback only to find out, you know, at the end of the audition, there was this where I was like, so what'd you think of that when you think that last take was good? Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Just think about the reaction that would be in, you know. And I don't know, should I have done it? No, we just want to show. So that one, okay, all right. And then reach around and press stop record. Like it caught all that ridiculous kind of mess, and I sent it in like a dummy. So confirm it before you submit. And watch playback to kind of assess and just see. I would leave enough time so you don't have, you know, time just to do 1 take or 2 takes. To that end, this is a little tip that I had proposed in some of the other classes that I taught, that I just think, I know it's like an ideal situation and we're all busy, we have things, you might not be able to do this, but I think it's a cool idea to try when you first get that script, before you really start breaking it down, before you start analyzing it. If you can step in front of your camera with or without a reader, press record, and just start getting your frame and start saying the things out loud before you've done all your analysis. You're still going to do your analysis, but trying some things out and watching it back and just see how the words come out of your mouth. But then, of course, when it's time to actually record, I would leave time for multiple takes to establish and figure out some of these things, especially if there's complicated blocking or multiple eye lines or, you know, props or whatever. So you can figure out some of that stuff. And I would say, this is not everybody, but for me, for instance, I'm just speaking from experience. The more deep the scene, like if it's a deep emotional scene, I've only got a few of those in me. I can only do so many. So if it's both, you know, very heavy emotionally, and there's specific blocking, I'm going to want to potentially rehearse some of the blocking beforehand when I'm not quite in that zone, just to make sure so that I don't quote unquote waste a take on doing like a silly thing with the stage direction, the blocking, that I could have easily avoided if I just like established, okay, I'm going to start here, I'm going to shift to here, and I'm going to look over there. You know what I mean? Just kind of basic, simple stuff. Second take, doing a different take, like a second to submitting 2 takes, basically what I mean, submitting 2 takes. Sometimes they'll specifically ask that in the taping instructions, and they'll give you specifics for what that is. If there is no information on that, and Laura and I talked about this before, I'm a fan of doing a second take, an optional, an alternate, and submitting a second take, I should say. But of course, it must be noticeably different than the first take. It can't just be slightly different. It's gotta, it's gotta be considerably different in approach. Don't wait until the deadline to submit if you can get it in sooner. I know this varies from casting director to casting director, but I have heard in many cases, and I've experienced myself on a short film iCast, I'm not even saying necessarily that they won't watch your audition. Sometimes they won't, many times they will, but let's just do a thought experiment real quick. You're casting a short film, 6 characters, okay? 2 of them are fairly difficult. They're very specific, like a young or an old person or someone with a special skill. They have to be able to sing opera, or they have to be able to play the violin, or they can juggle on a unicycle, right? All right. Cast member number 4, not very specific. It's this guy. It's just generic middle America white guy. Like there's thousands of us, right? So if you get a couple of me in immediately and you get like 5, 10 that are like really good, you don't even really need to focus that anymore as a casting director, because you've got this other thing that's really weighing on you that you got to make sure you see what I'm saying? So if you wait until if you're in my category in this particular example, and you've waited to the very last moment to submit, they've probably already found the person, or at least have a good idea. If they've been looking at this other guy for 2 days and you immediately got a really good one in, and they've shown it to a producer, shown it to a director, and they've been sitting like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is our guy. We like him. He's a great audition. You're going to lower your chances by submitting at the last minute. So I know you can only do what you can do, and I know different casting directors are different, but I try to get it in ASAP these days because I was missing. I know I was missing a lot of opportunities for certain ones by just getting it in barely under the deadline.
I would suggest instead of looking at the deadline, make it your goal, of course, considering authentic representation, considering you've done your homework, you've got your lighting, you have a good reader. Try to get it in within about 24 hours of the casting notice. And sometimes
what I was going to
that's
say.
doable. But if you make it your goal to be in within 24 hours of seeing it, and then it takes you a little bit longer, that is a far cry better. You know the saying, shoot for the moon, land among the stars. Because I've cast things before where I had a really difficult person to find, and at the end I'm scrambling because I have not, that one person that he said is really, really hard. Man, 3 days before the deadline, I'm like posting to Facebook groups, I'm going to Instagram, and I'm hashtagging stuff. I'm like, I gotta find this person. And so that other role, I'm not, if I get 25 extra tapes, I'm not going to watch all 25 if I already found somebody good, because I'm focused on this other character that was really difficult. And it's nothing against you, but at the beginning, when tapes are trickling in, I love to watch them. Towards the end, if I have found myself in a frantic moment, I'm just simply maybe not going to have that time on my schedule to watch everything. But at the beginning, I watch everything that comes in. So it's just a timing thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got several more things to say regarding self-tapes, and then I was going to talk a lot about next time about the moment before, making sure the top of your scene is where it needs to be, and some tips and tricks you can do for that. But our time is nearly running out today. So do we have any questions in the chat, and or anyone posing any questions right now that we can maybe run through?
Sure thing. And maybe we can talk about this tomorrow too. Laura, hopefully you'll be here tomorrow. But she was wondering about perfecting the eyeline, because that is so important. So if you think that's a quick answer, then you can answer it. If not, we'll postpone that one to tomorrow.
I don't know what she means by that, perfecting the eyeline.
Just can we talk about how to perfect your eyeline? What looks better on frame? For me, always make sure I can see your eyes, no matter what
Both of
person
them.
area. Make sure your eyes are the window to your soul. Make sure I can clearly see your eyes, no matter what. If you're looking up at someone, if you're looking down on someone, what is the emotion being conveyed, and then try to make your eye line match that. That would be my. And we can cover that tomorrow if you have it. So Venus was actually wondering if you would be able to scan your camera around the room so that they can see how your setup is done.
Nah. My room is a mess. The rest of this room, my wife would not be happy. This is I got a punching bag right here.
Okay.
So this is also my fitness area. I got a pull-up bar. I got a bike and treadmill and some other. There's a desk over here. There's a bunch of stuff going on. Basically, what I have, you see this backdrop. I've got some lights right up here that just, well, they came with the house, but they were in another room. They're like on a track. So I moved them in here so that I wouldn't have a lot of shadows. So that this light right here, you can see there's a light right here. It's just a ring light holding my my phone. So that it wouldn't cast big shadows back here. I have these lights pointed down behind me. And then I have a little bit, you see that shadow on my cheek? So I've got a little bit of a light coming off of here. They call that sometimes it's a hair light. It usually comes from up high, which I do have one coming from over here too. I've just been toyed around with it through the years, and this is not excellent. This is, I've already got a couple things I want to do to make this better as well. But yeah,
I
research.
think that's important to know, though, for folks who are probably like, oh, look at Joseph. He has this whole big studio. He has this great space. We could never be like him. And you're like, oh, no, really? Actually, I have stuff here, everywhere. I think that's important to know, because it's not about the space that you don't have. Ask God for creativity to use well the space that you do have. That was
Sure, yeah. And what
okay.
I did here too is, well, I'll see if I can pick this up. I got my notes right here. Hold on one second. Oh, feeling like an old man. I built this. All right, it's just a table, a little mini table, but it's just right here at a frame, so that if I need to be at a table, at a bar, if I want to lean, if there's a vibe where I kind of want to do a scene, I can obviously lower the camera and match this or whatever. Or if I need a prop within my grasp, I could just set this right over here, and I'm doing something, and then someone hands me something, I can grab them. Just very, very useful. I just made it for myself, so I could, if I'm at an office with a laptop, I can put my laptop right here, and I can actually use it. I can raise it up too if I need to. Again, because if my eye line is too low, and I can put like a shoebox in this and put my laptop right here, just at a frame, and I can be working on my computer. But that was just really helpful too to do, so that I could use for my auditions. All right, what other questions?
What focal length do you recommend?
Focal length. iPhone cinematic is what I use. Yeah, if you have enough space, I think it looks pretty cool to have a little bit of a longer lens for the shallower depth of field, which is kind of what that cinematic iPhone thing is kind of trying to mimic. I don't know what focal length that is. I'm guessing that's going up until like 80-ish, somewhere around there. Obviously, the wider the lens, the more you get your sides, and I don't want to see the sides of the walls over here. So it depends on your space. It depends on your space and your lighting, what you got. I am no expert when it comes to that. But again, I just use the setting on my iPhone. It says cinematic video, and it gives you a little bit of that shallow depth of field. It blurs out the back just a wee bit. What else?
All right. Roughly how long after the submission deadline via Actors Access breakdown do you find out whether or not you can audition?
Roughly after the.
So when you get invited to do a self-tape, C-mail, is that what it's called? I don't remember.
Yeah.
On Actors Access. How long do you usually have to wait after you submit to receive that invitation to audition?
I don't even know. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's within the day. Sometimes it can be the next day or two. I guess it depends on how early I put it, how far the deadline's out, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that there's a hard, fast answer to that.
It probably depends on the CD and the project.
Yeah, it depends on a lot. Yeah, because sometimes even though it's an open submission, if you're linked to an agent, they're going to go a lot of times they'll contact your agent, not you, even though you submitted, because your account's linked to an agency. So it depends on a lot of things, I think.
All right. And then last question, where online is a good place to get a microphone regarding voiceover auditions, what equipment should I get to start off? That is a whole nother session. And luckily for you, we actually have a voiceover Zoom coming up soon. We haven't put it on the calendar yet, but we do have somebody who's going to do specifically a voiceover based Zoom session for you guys. So unless you have something that you want to throw out there, maybe you want to talk about the mic that you use.
No, I'm not I don't do much voiceover stuff, so I don't really know. I would just say, again, the amount of equipment and the cost of equipment is plummeted over the past 5 to 10 years. So you can do a quick little Amazon. So, I mean, 10 minutes online, see what has the best reviews, what's in the price point that you want, and order it on Amazon or whatever your preferred method of ordering. But yeah, you can get a lav mic that would help a lot with the focus being on your voice and not everything else, or you can get a mic like I just had. There's just so many options. Lighting kits too. You can get multiple lighting kits to do something similar to what I have here for fairly inexpensive, and they'll come with dimmers these days. They come with gels, you know, for different hues to the light, all kinds of stuff like that.
All right. Well, tell you what, before we close out, why don't you give them a teaser for tomorrow?
A teaser for tomorrow. Okay. Yeah, so I forgot put my notes over here now. Took them off my DIY table, as someone called it. How to master any scene well. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, we're gonna talk about this. We're talking about stage direction. We're talking about owning the space. I'm talking about your interpretation of the scene. We're talking about rehearsing. Yes, no, maybe. What do you rehearse if you do? And then, like I said, several tactics to the moment before. Because as we mentioned before on this thing, really, really important. Don't have a lot of time. Casting directors have to go through hundreds of these. You have got to be in it from the very top. It doesn't mean you have to be freaking out or panicky or a 10 on a scale of 10, but you got to be connected. Something's got to be going on from the very word go. So I was going to talk about a lot of that. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I didn't even know I had the magic 10 there. 10 different techniques that you can use for your moment before to make sure the top of your self-tape audition is. And you can also use these on
if you
set
guys are
too.
not familiar with that phrase, moment before, make sure you are here tomorrow, because it is absolutely vital and will take your auditions absolutely to the next level.
All right.
All righty. So you are so welcome, Winter. Glad to have you. Lorraine says that Sweetwater is a good resource that she has found for microphones.
Winter. What's Winter's last name?
Winter, where are you?
Hawk. I took my husband's last name.
Oh, okay. Okay, different Winter, not the Winter. There's a Winter Elms that's making the rounds on the internet right now, who's a phenomenal singer. Okay, Winter Hawk is pretty stinking cool though. Is that real?
Winter
That's
Hawk
not real.
is a
Winter
phenomenal
Hawk.
dancer. She is crazy good. She's going to start coaching for Christian casting, actually. Side note. Okay, well, so Joseph, why don't we wrap then for today?
Yep,
And
yep,
you
and we'll
guys
see
are
you.
all invited back tomorrow. He's going to be hitting that moment before really, really hard. So if that's something that you've not spent a lot of time studying, if you're like, wait, I just thought I was supposed to perform the lines. No. You've got to figure out what happened before your character even steps in to perform those lines. And so I'm really excited about everything he's going to share with you tomorrow. So do you have any final insight or instructions for them before we close out for today?
I don't.
All right.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Yes, we love that you guys are able to come and appreciate. We do not take for granted that you spend your time here to learn. So we hope that you have gotten something from it. And I love actually what Tanya prayed, that that each person would be able to just take one new piece of information and apply it to their life to do one brand new thing in their own story. So thank you guys so much. And we will see you same time, same channel tomorrow. See ya.